Tesla, now at 840. Next 900 is our show for today. I wanted to thank you for joining us. Please note that there's a rule that says you're supposed to only do a 15-second intro on a show, so playing complete songs doesn't really fit how YouTube wants you to handle business. If you enjoy our guitar playing, I will play the whole song at the end of the show, but only if you put a Y or a yes in the comment section, and I will do so. So, by the way, there's a possibility I can't play it, so you might want to leave that one out there too. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks again for joining us. Please note any comments made here are copyrighted, and reuse of any of the information provided is prohibited without written permission. Now, we also want to mention that this is a big time for Tesla, so we wanted to encourage you to also join us and subscribe so you don't miss anything, because we do put out shows affecting trading that day, as we did this morning regarding the Iron Condor. Also wanted to note to you that we have room on our Patreon page for support as well. If you enjoy the analysis and would like to see better and more, by providing support, we're able to do it. And we have several different vehicles, Venmo, Cash App, as well as below you'll see our PayPal information. So today I was kind of excited because it's really nice to see Tesla hit 840. I have to say I'm completely shocked. The reason is that, as you know, I keep track of what's going on with the options. And in this case, there are ungodly number of call options that people had purchased at the 820, 825, 830 level. And now to see it go to 840, some of you are making an absolute killing on both the stock, if you own it long, as well as on the options as it starts to make its move this week. So a hearty congratulations to you. You deserve it based on what the stock is doing, etc. So the other question was kind of what else should we be looking at and why? There's one number that sort of grabs me that you might want to take a look at, which is there's an option called an 830 call that expires a week from today or Friday. That option, it's a call option I looked at. There are 36,000 of them, which is the highest number on the board. Usually when we talk about options, we kind of emphasize, in this case, the 800, 850s, 900s. And so it's kind of a shock to see a big sort of buildup of numbers right at the 830 number, and not even for this week. There are some big ones for this week, but for next week. So it really shows that there's a lot of people confident in where this stock is going and why. So I'd have to say this is somewhat of a head scratcher. Our usual process for last year was that we'd have a production number, it would push the stock nicely after the 3-day rule, and then we'd kind of go from there. After we did the S&P entry, we sort of entered a new realm, and that is that number one, the stock will fall after the initial number, and when the 3-day rule comes in, we'll then start to see a movement of the stock nicely. The one thing that we kind of predicted and is happening again on this quarter's numbers is this strange phenomenon where instead of the stock immediately spiking as it used to do prior to the S&P, we're now on this slow burn, slow to happen over 2 or 3 weeks movement of the stock price. And based on what we're seeing pre-earnings, or based on what we saw for the last couple of quarters, the new sort of pattern that's been established is sort of coming to bear. Now, the other question that's really going on is, as we've covered on numerous occasions, there are 2 data point processes that we have to go through over the next, call it 10 business days. The first is, how do all the numbers look? Did the numbers come out okay? that's half the discussion of what's going to happen with Tesla. We've already seen those production numbers, and we can imply, just multiply the number of vehicles produced by $60,000 a piece on average, and that's the number that we're expecting. So as I shared, I was a little off on this number because my expected production numbers, and we'll do a complete show on this over the next couple of days, because China is now the largest producer and deliverer, if you will, of Tesla vehicles. And because China has perhaps a third, if not half, of their sales at the 42,000 level, it was our expectation that the average sale price for Tesla would actually decline. The reality was it actually rose, and the reason why was that it turns out that there's a phenomenon going on where the interesting phenomenon here is that Elon isn't really breaking out the energy sector. So as a result, we're tying on more profit and revenue from the energy side successfully, but it's kind of hard to tease that out because you see it show up as an average increase in profit margin in sales, but the power business is strong, but we only find out about it after we have an average price of the car go up. So I would say that, not only do you install the electric systems, but there's some recurring revenue there in terms of maintenance and upgrades of those facilities. So, this is a growing portion of the business. The contention I want to make today, though, about why are we seeing such big numbers from Tesla? And I think we've come up with something very interesting. Muy interesante is one of my favorite Spanish phrases. And sehr interessant in Deutsch is another example. And that is something called the capital preservation people. So we spent a little time in our process discussing sort of different constituencies in the investment world. We know about the hedge funds, and they may be only 20%, 25% of the market, but the way they use capital to borrow shares and short and do all these creative things makes them a lot bigger a footprint than the amount of people, amount of dollars that are involved. So the next question then is, where is this push coming from? And not only where is this push coming from on Tesla's stock price, will it continue? And why is it there? And who are these people that are so powerful that they can say to the hedge funds trying to push Tesla stock price below 800, hey, we got to get in here now, and we don't care what you guys are doing, we're still going to make our move. And this actually introduces a very interesting question, because let's say you have a fund, and that fund has decided to lend shares to the hedge funds that they can do what they want with, either short the stock, etc. Well, what happens when the very funds that have lent those shares out have decided to, hey, we want more shares of this company? Well, they're basically pursuing the opposite strategy to the companies to whom they've lent shares. And so they basically end up potentially putting some very rich people out of business. And yeah, we already know that there's an 11% is what the current, within the last week and a half, number was. So there's a declining percentage of hedge funds that are shorting as the stock has been rising. And then it was the opposite. When the stock was falling, a huge percentage of 25% plus of the shares was actually shorted when we had those problems with the production of the Model 3. So there's an interesting business axiom called KISS. And KISS stands for keep it simple, stupid. And in this case, what I want to argue from a KISS standpoint is I want to discuss, there's a group of investors called capital preservation people. So there are some people that are like, hey, do everything we can to get as much return as possible, as high as we can, and that'll be your hedge funds, et cetera. That's their task. But there's also a group of investors out there that's like, look, we want growth. We want big cap growth. So what that means is that, hey, not only are we getting an increasing revenue, but we're getting increasing stock prices as well. And then there's a comment that says we also want big cap growth because when it comes to big companies, they could go out of business, and companies have, but on average, the bigger the company is, there's a reason why it's big, and if it can maintain its momentum, you further reduce the risk. So the issue that I'm seeing here is, well, what's happening with the largest block of capital, which is probably 30% of the market. When you look at the types of funds, et cetera, like, hey, no matter what, we don't want to lose any capital. And then if we make some money, we like that. But in general, that's our profile. So the next, so why is this a big deal? Well, what's interesting is that these guys don't want to take any risk. And this brings up why I believe we're in a power zone right now for Tesla, and this is going to increase. So I had a talk with a buddy who's familiar with Tesla's operations, and some very interesting things are happening. It turns out that the Fremont factory, let's say we're at about 600,000, heading towards 600,000 vehicles a year. That's 1,600 vehicles a day times, let's call it 600, $1,600 or 1,600 vehicles a day. Factory is running 24/7, and they're doing so six days a week. So that gives us a certain number of vehicles coming out of there. Now we also know that China is exceeding that. So what we were told is that China is actually double the size, and as it starts rolling, it's going to end up being at least double the size of what can be done in Fremont, given all the constraints of location and et cetera, et cetera. So what the big news is that, let's say you have a facility that does 600,000 vehicles. In theory, what you have is China does 600,000 plus, let's say, 30%, right? And that'll be, let's say, by early part of next year. Well, the wild card and why I think we're in a very interesting zone right now in terms of what the stock price is doing is we're going to find out from Elon when production is going to start. But there is an interesting calculation that's going on that I think is kind of a game changer for Tesla. And that is that I was told that the Fremont factory is 3x the size of, the Austin factory is 3x the size of the Fremont plant, and Germany is riding that size difference as well. So you can do kind of a deduction because part of the size increase is both facilities are going to have an adjacent battery factory to feed those factories. So that's a legitimate, maybe it's 3 times the size, but you have to deduct, let's say, 20% of that size increase because the footprint is consumed by a battery plant that Fremont doesn't have. So if you add Fremont to the Reno facilities, let's say, it's just square foot wise a bigger facility. But what I'm generally suggesting is at least both of the new factories are double the size and therefore double the capacity potential of the current factories that Tesla has around the world. So the question that comes up is, if you're a very conservative investor, what's better? 2 factories, different parts of the world producing, or 4 factories, you don't know the exact number yet, but you're not seeing the production. But what happens with capital preservation folks is that the hedge funds and those guys, perhaps like us, are focused on what's happening over the next 90 days. As you'll notice, whenever you hear particularly Colin Rust of Oppenheimer, listen to some of those hedge funds. What they often do is they start doing these extrapolations of what the numbers are going to look like, production, profit, revenue, et cetera, EBITDA, into next year, the year after, and the year after that. And then they're making purchases, et cetera, now with the idea in mind of, hey, where's this thing going to be? Not, we're interested in now for sure, but what's the footprint look like setting up into the future, particularly 1, 2, 3 years out? And so the interesting point here is, now, wait a second, how is Tesla's growth going to really work? Are they just going to double in size next year? They're going to triple in size next year? Are they going to quadruple in size? And that's what's going to be interesting over the next 7 days in terms of what's implied by what we learn about the company. So it's my belief then that it's these, I call them the big dogs, because the percentage of capital they represent exceeds half the capital out there to be invested. And when the big dog chooses to eat, they eat often and whenever they'd like. And they tend to consume meals that should have gone to other animals because they're just bigger than everybody. And then the other problem you're running into here is something that I didn't come up with this. It's called discounted growth. So the other thing that happens for capital preservation people is they hire people, and what those people actually do is they get a drone and they fly them, but none of the information is ever put on the internet, as we've seen. They'll fly drones. They'll go to the local bar and find out from current workers how things are going. Are you really busy? Are you not busy? Are people happy? Unhappy? Are bonuses good or not? All this information we don't get to see, except for these are the kind of things that result in upgrades, and therefore stock prices rising, and we kind of get the news way later after all this has occurred. And so that's kind of why I'm bringing this up today, is that we're getting a lot of movement. There's not a lot of public news. There's clearly a general public news because we all know about the new factories going up. But that's the issue that's lurking here, I believe, which is for the people who like predictable growth and no drama and no fun at all, but they just want hard, cold steel. That's what they're getting from Tesla right now. And what I think is happening is something I call the Elon Monitor. And what that means is if you go back and listen to Colin Russ at Oppenheimer, one of the things he pointed out was, the people from CNBC were like, look, Elon is a nut job, basically, and we don't know what he's going to do. And Colin's response was, that may or may not be the case, but you need to go see those factories and determine whether or not they're producing vehicles. And now that those facilities are up and in production, the measurement stops being about what Elon will and will not do, and it starts to be about what's coming out of those factories, how many of them are coming out, are customers buying them, what's the profit margin. There are all these hard numbers that people that want predictable growth that are now available, including, you probably can't sit there and watch the number of vehicles coming out of China, but believe you me, as those trucks start rolling with the open back and the vehicles stacked, I believe you're going to start seeing Tesla move into kind of a middle agehood where the stock spikes and then it enters this steady growth of price range, because the folks who are in the capital preservation game tend to have large amounts of capital coming in on a monthly basis for their pensions, et cetera, and they're here for predictable growth with little or no drama. And so I believe that the drama premium or lack thereof for Elon is starting to disappear, exactly as Mr. Russ at Oppenheimer had predicted, and therefore we're getting a chance to see the dogs of that group of money start to eat. And once they start to eat, the little dogs have to get out of the way because they have great technique, but they don't have anything like the capital of this group of investors. So I'm looking forward to more of this. I think that we're in the 850s early next week, and post earnings with our 3-day rule. Plus, we're in that 900 category pretty easily because of the groups that can now sit with Tesla and Elon and get comfortable where they had to be very light on their feet previously. And the more vehicles that we see coming out of these factories, the more comfortable they will get. So I want to thank you for joining us for a second time today. I hope you find the information useful. We also want to remind you we do have some SpaceX shares if there's interest. We also wanted to encourage you to consider joining us on Patreon and liking and subscribing. Finally, I wanted to encourage you to, prior to lovemaking, do not eat more than a salad because this provides plenty of blood flow that's available to have external activities because your stomach isn't consuming all those calories. And then we have our usual health tips below. I'll just highlight our kidney doc recommended no more than once a week fried foods. And we also wanted to encourage you to not go to bed within 4 hours of eating, ideally minimum 2, so the food can digest and you don't generate potential issues with ill health from upper respiratory activities. So don't forget our survey, yes or no, if you'd like me to go through the full song, and we'd be happy to do so. Tschüss German, au revoir French, Lehitro, Hebrew, Choda Hafiz, Farsi, Zdravstvuyte, Russian, Ni hao ma Chinese, Konbanwa Japanese. And we just wanted to say have a great day and bye for now. And again, congratulations for those of you who just made a killing on Tesla stock.